Hello everyone, I'm Sahid. Thank you for clicking this video. I'm very happy that you're here. So today I'm going to continue my chapter series on this Canadian literature book that I've been reading called Moon of the Crusted Snow by Waubgeshig. Today I'm going to be reading chapter 28, and this book ends at chapter 31, and so it's only a few chapters that are left. To sort of just give a brief summary and a little intro before I start today's reading, Moon of the Crusted Snow is about a small indigenous anishinaabe community located in the northern region of Canada. This indigenous community, is one of the first nations of, or one of the famous and still common indigenous groups that have for so long lived in Canada and have just remained and sort of preserved their culture and their people, their traditions, their customs. So throughout the years, they've been resilient against obstacles, and they continue today to be resilient, despite colonization that affected them during early times and certain just life obstacles that they continue to face within their communities. They stayed resilient, and we see that in this book with the power crisis that they're facing in this small Anishinaabe community. This power crisis has forced them to make sudden changes in their lives. There are times in which they don't have access to internet, their electricity. They can't even watch TV. They have to start using emergency generators to sort of have power, to be able to also have water. These are basic necessities that every human being should be able to have. And unfortunately, due to the circumstances they're in, these things are slowly being pulled away from them. And we've gotten to a point in which, the emergency food that they had for the community is starting to run out. People are engaging in violence. People are, having food browse. People are starting to die because of suicide and not wanting to just continue to deal with the difficulties they're facing. And community leaders are starting to feel helpless. Outsiders are coming from different parts that are close by, such as Gibson, Everson's Mills. Outsiders such as Justin Scott, who's a white man who's coming from Gibson, somebody that's unusual in their community, coming to this small nation of a community. People are very worried about him. And through the chapters, we see that he's not really, a well-trusted person. He can be trusted because of the things he does and things he says to people. And through the chapters, people become more and more worried of him. And also in this book, they're also in a season that's just making it more difficult for them. They're currently in one of the harshest times of winter. The book started around the fall/autumn, but now it's at the peak of winter, and it's much worse. It's much harder, especially when you don't have these modern equipments and electricity, internet, easy access to heat, and you have to just go back to traditional ways. And so elders in the community are advising council members or leaders like even to start taking action and going back to the old ways. And so even is starting to take initiative to do things to help his community, and other community leaders are also trying to find ways, despite not having communication with the outside world due to the power crisis they're facing. And so all these things really matter. And throughout the book, we see how human motives change, how people are reacting to all these things. How when you have food insecurity, when you have issues with power, how that really changes relationships and how that affects people's lives and their families. And it's just been really moving reading this book. And also learning about the Anishinaabe culture and how it's their different families make sure that they instill their and preserve their cultures through generations and through their kids. And I found that really beautiful, and it's just been really interesting seeing, despite all the difficulties, how people are still engaging in hope and loving one another. And I think that's so important in a community. And so yeah, this book has just been really meaningful for me, and this is one of the first Canadian literature book. This is the first Canadian literature book that I'm reading, so it's been really impactful for me. To start, we're going to start chapter 28. Chapter 28. The water bubbled in the big black pot on top of the wood stove in the basement. Wearing thick oven mitts, Nicole grabbed the handles and turned to walk it carefully back up the stairs. The morning sunshine outside was bright enough to light the basement, so she didn't need to juggle a flashlight as well. Her hands ached and her arms trembled by the time she made it upstairs. She trudged across the kitchen floor and grimaced as she hoisted the pot of hot water onto the useless electric stove. She turned to the sink to arrange the clothes she was about to wash. Underwear, socks, and t-shirts always got priority, with jeans and sweaters going through only if they began to stink. She scooped a small amount of powdered detergent out of the bottom of the box and sprinkled the grains sparingly over the laundry. Nicole grabbed the pot of water and poured it into the wash basin, As it splashed onto the clothes and steam swelled into her face, she turned her head to the living room behind her. "How are you guys doing in there?" "Good," Nagons replied. "We're building a new house for Nukumis and Misomis." I think that, by the way, means grandfather and grandmother. Okay. Nicole put the empty pot back on the stovetop and picked up the wooden spoon beside the sink to mix the detergent into the clothes. A new house. I'm gonna have to come and see that. She looked into the living room, where she saw her children sitting on the carpet playing with toy blocks. Nagon's pink sweatshirt was fading, and the holes in the knees of Mygon's small jeans were growing daily. Both kids would outgrow these clothes soon anyway, and somehow they'd have to find some bigger ones soon. They both looked up at her, smiling. "Why do Nukomis and Misomis need a new house?" Nicole asked. "Theirs is still in good shape." "This one's their summer house," replied Mygon. "Summer house," echoed the girl. "Oh, I see. Why do they need a summer house?" Nicole untied her bun and regathered it more tightly and neatly. "Just in case," Mygon said, and turned his eyes back down to the interlocking plastic. "Just in case, eh?" she muttered. "Well, I gotta go outside just for a minute." "Okay, Mommy," Nagons answered. Nicole went back to the kitchen to get the pot and came back through the living room just to put on her winter boots. She didn't bother grabbing her jacket from the coat rack. She opened the door, went quickly out into the chill, and dipped the pot into the high snow. She packed the snow into the pot and brought it back into the house. By anyone's guess, it was mid-March. Terry Megas was probably the only one who still knew the exact date. Nicole preferred to wait out the winter rather than lament the days since the power went out or generate any false optimism about how close it was to spring. But the more tolerable temperatures and heavier snow indicated that winter had peaked. At least a month and a half of snow and cold remained, but the days were longer, and the twilight hung low over the horizon in the in the luminous blue that foretold spring. Soon there would be no more snow melt for drinking, cooking, and washing water, and they would have to figure something else out. There would be no return to running water. Back in the basement, Nicole dumped the snow into the large plastic basin a few meters from the wood stove. A collection of basins, buckets, and bins held melted snow water. On the other side, a smaller number of large pots contained water that had already been boiled for consumption. It was an efficient rotation, and it hadn't taken too long for them to adjust. After all, it was how Dan and Patricia's generation had grown up. Nicole heard a knock. She put the pot on the floor and walked upstairs to see Tyler standing at the door. Two braids hung behind his ears, and his gray toque was pulled down over his eyebrows. He feigned a weak smile when he saw her, without going all the way to the door. She waved him in. Tyler stepped inside and closed the door. He looked at the kids on the floor and smiled. Buzu Binojinyak, he declared warmly. Hey kids, what you doing? Making houses, Nagons replied. Oh, every good houses. We'll need to give you guys a job next summer. Tyler turned to Nicole. What's up? She asked. Is Eve around? No, he went out into the bush to check some snares. When do you think he'll be back? I don't know. Probably soon. He left pretty early this morning. What's going on? He sighed, and his broad shoulders drooped. Auntie Eileen died. Nicole covered her mouth. Tears welled in her brown eyes. And that is the end of chapter 28. Oh no. I can't even laugh. Let's talk about it. That was actually quite sad. Okay, I'm going to just start with Nicole. So we start with Nicole doing things in the house. She has to do some laundry, and during this time, it's not easy to do laundry as often, and so we read that she sort of starts with the things that she has to prioritize, such as underwears, socks, and things that are needed very often. And then she does the jeans and other things later when they get to the point which it smells bad, right? And in a condition that this community happened to be, it makes sense to do that. Starting with the underwears and rushing that and they have to do it the traditional way by hand, and they don't have all these modern equipments and electricity to even use modern equipment, and so they're doing it by hand and washing things with detergent. And yeah, and she was doing that, and while she's doing that, we have a little cute, nice moment in which the kids are building a house. And they're having fun in the living room, and Nicole, so just questioning them, what are you doing? And it's like they're building a house for, sorry, I have to go back to the book to see how they pronounced their grandfather and grandmother in um, the Anishinaabe Moan language. They call them Nukomis and Misomis. Mishomis. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but if I'm not mistaken, if I'm not wrong, from the previous chapters I read, that means grandfather and grandmother. But yeah, so they're sort of building a house for their grandfather and grandmother. Obviously, it's not really an actual house; it's just a little something that they're doing within the house. And she's like wondering, they have a nice house. Why are you building it? And like, oh, it's a summer house, and because they're also part of them is ready for summer, and they're currently still in the peak time of winter. So them building a summer house it's very interesting because it's nowhere close to summer yet. But these kids are hoping, because it's been so long, the days have seemed much longer. Things just seem days seem to be passing by, but it really isn't, because it's just the days are just longer, and they seem longer because of the extreme cold and just how everything is currently in their current circumstances. And so Nicole was wondering why they're doing that. But we happen to read later within this chapter that it's still around mid-March, and it's like the peak time of winter, and they're still slightly hoping for when it's going to be spring, and they just want it to be sort of hotter already. But the part of them is also, in this book we read that they're also slightly worried that when it does become spring, how are they going to have water? Because due to this power crisis, like I mentioned earlier in the introduction, water is a huge theme. This basic necessity is something that this community is literally running out of, and it's going to get to a point in which they're not going to have any, and it's really sad even thinking about that. And so that's another worry for them. And based on what we read in this chapter, they are literally using snow, um, snow water, and literally storing snow and boiling snow to be able to have water in the house, in their family, and to give their kids that, to be able to drink water themselves. And it's just really sad reading about that, having to do that. It really just shows how horrible this time they're in is. Then later on, we read that one of the oldest members in the community, Eileen, who we come to know in the previous chapters, and she was the one who, when they had their first sort of general assembly of the community people, she spoke at that, and she performed like rituals and stuff of the Anishinaabe tradition. And she's one of the people who felt it was important to keep passing on these traditions of the Anishinaabe people in their community. And it's so unfortunate that she's died. And we have moments in which her and Even have like a connection moment in which she's given Even advices and saying things. And reading that at the end of the chapter was really sad that she's now dead. And I'm pretty sure one of the things that contributed to this is the conditions that they're in. And a part of me wanted to just cry. It was actually really sad because I really admired reading about Eileen and what she meant to the community, and the things that she shared with even the people. And it's just really sad reading about that. And just not only her, but the other older people who are dying in this time. It's just really sad. But yeah, that's sort of chapter 28. We see that it's just getting worse and worse, and it's about to be an end to this story, and I feel as though, is there really a solution? I don't really know if it's gonna get better, and this was one of the questions I thought to myself: is this ever gonna get better? How is it gonna get worse? And we see it seemed to just not be getting better, and yeah, and I just feel sad, but yeah. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, please kindly subscribe, like, and comment. Thank you for watching through this to the end of this video. I really appreciate it, and yeah, it really means a lot. I hope you watch the remaining chapter series of this book, and I appreciate your support deeply. Thank you. Bye.